All right, Rabbi, say good morning. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Kuf Hey 105, and we are going to pick up. We have a lot to do today. Actually, at the two dots on Kuf Dalal base, the two dots on 104b. We're actually going to try to go a little bit quickly today, as I want to be able, Emir Hashem, to make it to the end of Amud Beis. You're going to see some beautiful, magnificent Gemaras today. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's Shara Talmud Torah, sponsors of the month of Sivan, Justin and Abigail Rosemore, in memory of their beloved son Kobe Chaim Yaakov David Zichron Levracha Ben Yosef Tzaddik. Our monthly Talmud Torah sponsors as well, Alan and Sue Meirowitz, and family Jason, Deborah, Justin, Rebecca, Mindy, Simcha, and all of the grandchildren. Emerita for the Shlema for Sue, Shulamis Tova, Bas Mindel. And we thank our DAF sponsors, Michael and Rifki Leichter, for dedicating the shir this morning in memory of Michael's grandmother, Dina Bas Chaim Getzel, Zichron Levracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and those who acquire a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And Abosai, with that, let us begin. So Kasav Os Achas Samuch L'Ksav. So Abosai, so the Gemara says, Ksav Al Gabi Ksav. So remember, the Mishnah said that for Shabbos, if you go ahead and you write on top of an already existing letter, that halacha l'mais you're not chayiv, right? Because you haven't done something really of substance legabe Shabbos. That's not called ksiva, to go ahead and write on an already existing letter. Says the Gemara, Man Tana Amr Chizlok Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Yehuda. The Sanya Haresh Shaya Tzarach Lichtov As Hashem, and it's coming Lichtov Yehuda. But it's an interesting case. What happens if a person was supposed to had in mind to go ahead and write the name of Hashem, but instead he writes the name Yehuda? Now, he doesn't really write the name Yehuda. Instead, what does he do? He writes Yud Hey Vav, and instead of the Dalet, he ends up writing Hey. So he writes the name of Hashem, but that was not his kavana. V'tav alo hitl bol dalis. So instead of writing the Dalet of Yehuda, he accidentally wrote a Hey. So he ends up going ahead and writing Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of Hashem. So what's the halacha? Ma'avir alav kol mosum mekatra de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says he doesn't have to erase and rewrite the name. Rather, he just traces over the letters. So just rewrite the letters on top of the letters, and that's called the writing of the name of Hashem Lishma. Such a name, right? Such a writing is not really preferred. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda holds that halacha l'maisa, writing on top of an already existing letter, is significant. So that does not reflect the view of the Mishnah, which holds that it is insignificant. Tana if a person wrote one letter, supposed to remember again, normally the shir for writing is two letters. What happens if a person only wrote one letter, but it happens to be that one letter represents the completion of a sefer? Let's say, for example, that Rashi says of Tanakh, person's writing one of the Sifrei Tanakh, and he writes one letter to finish the sefer, or arag chut echad v'yishlim ala beged, or a person only sews one stitch, but that one stitch is the completion, ultimately again, of the beged. Chayiv, an individual is chayiv. So the Gemara says, so both say, interestingly enough, even though you're only writing one letter and sewing one stitch, you're chayiv. Mantana, whose opinion is this? Amar Rav Huna, Rabbi Eliezer, he da Amar Achas al ha'arig chayiv, because Rabbi Eliezer says that halacha l'maisa, adding one stitch, one additional stitch, or one final stitch to an already woven beged is already considered to be significant. So both say, so you see that although there is a shear for, let's say, writing and for weaving, if you're adding on some unit of significance, for example, adding one letter to complete the sefer, or adding one stitch in an already stitched garment, halacha l'maisa, those are considered to be significant, and therefore will generate chiyuv. Rav Ashi Amar, afil timur Rabbanan. This could even reflect the view of the Rabbanan. Why? Lahashlim shiny. Because I will say, even the Rabbanan, who normally say you need to write two letters, you need to stitch two stitches, will agree that if you are going ahead and writing the final letter, or you are making the final stitch, that of course that will be significant. So the Gemara goes weiter. I'm Rabbi Ami. Kasav os achas b'Tiveria v'achas b'Tzipori. What happens if a person wrote one letter while in Tiveria and one letter while in Tzipori? Right, two different cities. Chayiv. Ultimately, again, the person is chayiv. Why? Because ksivahi elishem mechusar kreva. Because I will say you've written two bona fide letters. It's just that the only thing that they're missing is proximity, right? They're not close to each other, but halach l'maisi, you've written two letters. V'hatnan kasav al shnei koslei habayis v'al shnei dabei apinkas ve'ein negin zem ze pater. But we learned in the Mishnah that if you write two letters that are not really read together as one unit, that you're not chayiv. So we'll say again from the Mishnah we understood that it's not enough just to write two letters, but you have to write two letters that are read together as a unit. So we'll say if you're writing one letter in Sipori and one letter in Tiveria, Bipashtas again, they're not read together. Hasam mechusar ma'aseh dekreva. Hachalo mechusar ma'aseh dekreva. We'll say here's the difference. In that case over there, I should say in the case that we just quoted over here, the letter in Sipori and the letter in Tiveria, technically speaking, are written on things that could be brought together and read as one unit. The only thing they're missing is for someone to transport the letter from one location to the other. In the case of the Mishnah, the way the letters are written is they can never be actually brought together to be read as one complete unit. So it's an interesting distinction. So even if there is a geographic divide between the letters, if they're written in such a way that if they're brought to the same location, they could be read as one unit, then einachinami you'll be chayiv. But even if they have close geographic proximity, but they're written in a way that they can never be read, in other words, let's say there's too much space between them, they can never be read as one unit, therefore again one will be pater. Tana. Hegi os achos chayiv. If a person fixes one letter, he's chayiv. So Gemara says, I don't understand, what does that mean? Hashta, kosav os achos pater. Hegi os achos chayiv. I don't understand. The halacha is you only chayiv if you write two letters. So if you write one letter, you're going to be pater. But yet, if you fix one letter, you're going to be chayiv. That doesn't seem to make much sense. Amrav Sheish Esachama Askina. What's the case? Kigon shenatlo legago shelches va'aso shnei zainin. What's the case I was saying? The case is where you went ahead and you erased the top of the ches and you made it into two zayins. So also remember again the way a ches is written in a Sefer Torah, not like a ches you think about it with a flat top. But a ches is written with a pointed top. A ches is actually two zayins combined together. So what's the case for halacha l'maaseh you be chayiv on Shabbos? If you erase the middle of the roof of the ches, you effectively make two letters. So halacha l'maaseh, with an act of fixing, quote unquote, one letter, altering one letter, you could actually be chayiv for kosev on Shabbos. Very interesting. Rava Amar kigon shenat lo letago shel dalid va'asaresh. So Rava says, what's the case? The case could be where you took off the tag, the crown of the dalid, and you made it into a resh. Rashi says over here, "Telo havi el hagos osachos ubedavar muat chayiv hoil v'zer tikkun hasefer dash la'adam lishol sefer she'ino muga." So it's interesting if I understand. If you take off the roof of the dalit and make it into a reish, still that's only one letter. So why would you be chayiv? So Rashi says, let's say for example you have one of the Sifrei Tanakh, and let's say again you have a dalit that was supposed to be a reish, and let's say that's the last letter needed to totally go ahead and prepare the sefer. If you going back to what we said before, to the writing of one letter, which represents a unit of completion of a sefer, is significant enough to make you chayiv on Shabbos. So, for example, if you have one of the Sifrei Tanakh and you have a dalit in there that's supposed to be a reish, and you erase the top of the dalit, the tag, the crown of the dalit, in order to make it into a reish, and that's the final letter necessary to complete the sefer, you will be chayiv. So the Gemara says, Tana niskavim lichtov os achos va'alu biyado top of kofhei shtayim. So let's say a person had in mind to only write one letter, but it turns out that he ends up writing two letters. For example, again I will say he had in mind to go ahead and write a ches, but he ends up writing two zayins. So the Gemara says, what's the halacha? Chayiv. A person is chayiv. So the Gemara says, but one second, hotnan potter. But we learned halacha l'maaseh that a person is potter. Because again, I will say, remember again, you didn't have kavanah to write two letters. Lokashya, ha de bai ziyune, ha de lo bai ziyune. To which the Gemara says it depends. If the letters still require their crowns, then ultimately, again, you'll be potter. But halacha l'maaseh, if the letters don't require their crowns, or it's a fully complete letter, then you will be chayiv. Says the Gemara, kasav os achos no trikon. So this is interesting. We'll say, what happens if you write one letter that's in a manik? Right, one letter that's in a manik. So remember again, we'll say what we've seen so far is that halacha l'maaseh, in order to be chayiv on Shabbos, you have to write two letters. The only exception to this rule is when you write one letter that is the completion of a sefer. So if you write like the last letter in a sefer Torah on Shabbos, or it doesn't have to be a sefer Torah, you write the last letter in any sefer that completes the sefer on Shabbos, obviously that is a significant act of ksiva, because now you've gone ahead and finish a letter. Or for that matter, if you do something, some tikkun to one letter which creates two, you erase the middle of the roof of the ches, making it into two zayins of bichayev. What happens if you write one letter, but that one letter isn't a trikon, isn't a manik, right? Or that one letter is an abbreviation for a much longer word? What's the halacha over there? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Huda ben Beseira says that you're chayiv, Nachum say that you're pater. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishra Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra, Minayin l'lashon trikum min Torah. Now remember, let's understand something. The fact that Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira says that you are chayiv indicates that in his view, a notrikon, a nomanic word, is a complete word. So effectively, he views it that when you're writing one letter, you're effectively writing an entire word. So it says the Gemara, from where do you know that in a trikon? From where do you know that halacha lamaisa, a mnemonic or an abbreviation, is considered to be significant? Shene'emar, listen to this. Ki av hamon goyim nisaticha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avraham Avinu, I will make you into a father of a multitude of nations. So the Gemara understands over here that av hamon is a mnemonic. The Gemara says, av nisaticha le'umos. Aleph stands for I have made you a father to the nations. Beis, Bachar nisaticha le'umos. I have made you like the oldest and the most vital amongst the nations. Hamon chaviv nisaticha ba'amos. I've made you a great multitude amongst the nations. Melech, that's the hay. Melech nisaticha le'umos. I've made you a king amongst the umos. Vasik nisaticha ba'umos. I made you distinguished amongst the nations. Ne'eman nisaticha le'umos. I've made you trustworthy amongst the nations. So you see from here that Av Hamon actually stands for a much longer promise. Rabbi Yochanan, the day on Rabbi Yochanan himself says, Anochi. So we'll say Anochi, this is in the Aseres Hadibros. The first word of the Aseres Hadibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochi is also in the Trigon, it's also in the Manik. For what? Ana nafshi ksivas Yahavis. I, God myself, wrote this Torah and gave it to you. We'll say that's Anochi. Rabbanan Amri, Amira Ni'ima Ksiva Yehive. Rabbanan say it stands for something different. Anochi stands for Amira Ni'ima, a beautiful statement or a beautiful statement, beautiful words have I written and given to you. Ike da Amri Anochi L'mafreya. Others say that the word Anochi is to be understood backwards. What's the mnemonic of Anochi backwards? Yahiva ksiva ne'emanin amare. I have given you these words, I have given you these writings, ne'emanin amire. Its words are trustworthy. Debei Rabbi Nassan Amri, ki yarat haderech lenegdi. So we'll say, so remember again, this is the Malach talking to Bilam, right? When Bilam is on his way to curse Klal Yisrael, and the donkey will not go ahead and move anywhere. So what does the donkey say? Anochi yatzati l'satan, right? Kiyarat haderech lenegdi. So the Gemara says, what does this stand for? Kiyarat yira ra'asa natasa. It ignores the donkey saw, it became afraid, and therefore it veered off the road. The Rabbi Shmuel Tana Carmel. What does Carmel stand for? So we'll say, so remember again, this is talking about by the Karbanos, Kar Mole, a complete kernel. Ravacha Rayakov Amar, V'hu Kilalani Klala Nimratzes, and he cursed me, a Klala Nimratzes. So what does that mean? So we'll say this is by David HaMelech and Shimi ben Gera. Remember again, when David's son Avshalom rebels against David, David flees the city, and Shimi ben Gera, who was a cousin of Shaul, comes out and starts cursing David. So who kilalani kilala nimratzes? So the Gemara says nimratzes is no trikon. What did Shimi say to David? Noefu, you are an adulterer. Moavihu, you're a Moavi. Rotzeahu, you're a murderer. Sorerhu, you're an oppressor. Toevahu, you're an abomination. That's nimratzes. Rav Nachar bar Yitzchak Amar manidaber umanitstadak. This is by the brothers and Yosef, right? Before the Yosef reveals his identity as they still think he's just the despotic viceroy of Egypt. So this is when they took the goblet, did not show what's happening. So they say, Mane daber manit stadak. How could we, literally it means, what should we say and how should we exonerate ourselves? How should we make ourselves just? So nitztadak stands for Nechonim anachnu, we are correct. Tzadikim anachnu, we are righteous. Taharim anachnu, we are pure. Dakim anachnu, we are humble. Kidoshim anachnu, we are holy. So we'll say the point of all of this is the Gemara is just pointing out that you see that the concept of an otrikon, you see that the concept ultimately again of an amanic is something that is even embedded biblically. This goes back therefore to Rabbi Yoshua ben Beseira's statement that what? That halacha l'maisa, if a person goes ahead and writes one letter, but that letter is in a triko, that you're going to be chayiv. I will say, and obviously the Rambam does not paskin like that. The Rambam paskin is like the position of the Chachamim, who says that halacha l'maisa, writing one letter, even if that letter is in a manik, halacha l'maisa, one is not chayiv for that. One is not chayiv for that. Good. Says the Mishnah, hakose beis osios b'shtei ha'alamos. If a person writes two letters in two lapses of awareness, achos shachar is the achas bein arbaim, one in the morning and one in the evening. So the shaila is, there's now two different lapses of awareness. So are they mitzaref? Do they combine to form the shir of ksiva to make michayiv? So what's the halacha? Rabbi Gamliel mechayiv echam pochen. Rabbi Gamliel says that you're chayiv. The chachamim say that you are pater. So the Gemara says, what are they arguing about? Rabbi Gamliel savar in yedil lechatzi shir. So you will say, Rabbi Gamliel says that recovering from a lapse of awareness, right? Remember again, you become chayiv when you realize what you did. Rabbi Gamliel says you could only realize what you did if you've done something of significance. So if you've only written one letter, realizing that afterwards does not go ahead and create the realization to go ahead and generate any kind of chiyuv. So ultimately, again, Rabbi Gamliel says essentially your yediyah is only meaningful when? After you write the second letter. So because that, Rabbi Gamliel will say the two acts of writing go ahead and are mitzdaref. For Rabbanan Sabri, the Rabbanan on the other hand hold that yesh yediyah lechatzi shir. That ultimately, again, when you realize, you have a realization after writing of the first letter that you did something wrong, that ultimately, and then again you subsequently write a second letter, those two letters are not connected because there was an awareness in between them. So essentially the shaila is, do we say that an awareness about a halachically insignificant act is considered to be an awareness so as to divide the two acts from one another? Rabbi Gamliel says no. Therefore, the two acts combine, and one will be chayiv for a letter written in the morning, a letter written in the evening. The Chachamim say yes. Good. We'll say Rambam Paskin is like the Chachamim, that halacha l'maisa, writing a letter in the morning and writing a letter in the evening, do not combine to form the requisite shir for chiyuv. Hadrun alach habona. Shkach bosei. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Ha'orig shlosha chutin betchila va'achas ala orig. Rabbi Eliezer says, if a person goes ahead and weaves 3 chutin, 3 strings, 3 threads, right, or achas ala orig, or for that matter, you add on 1 stitch to an already woven garment, chayv, one is chayv. Chacham say bein betchila bein misov shiura beis chutin. Chacham disagree. They say, listen, it doesn't make a difference when you're sewing. The beginning of the garment, end of the garment. The halacha is you're only chayiv for oreg. Oreg really is weaving. You're only chayiv for weaving. Ultimately, again, if you weave 2 stitches. Ha'ose shtei batinirin benirin bekiros benafa bekara besal chayiv. We'll say if you go ahead and you make shtei batinirin. Now, shtei batinirin means essentially, we'll say we actually saw this 2 days ago with the basket, right? The way they would go ahead and let's say make a reed basket is you would take long strips of reed, right? Lay them out in a downward fashion and take smaller strips and go ahead and weave them through. That act of weaving it through is called osin shtei batinirin, making 2 loops. They used to have this utensil that would allow you essentially to loop the smaller pieces of reed through the larger pieces of reed. That's called oseshtei batinir and benir and bekirus. We'll see what these terms mean. Benafa, bekavra, besal chayiv, va'atofer based tfiros. And one who goes ahead and sews 2 stitches, va'korea amanas litfar based tfiros. So we'll say again, if you stitch 2 stitches, you're chayiv. And this is actually interesting. We're now introduced to a new malacha, the malacha of korea. Korea means tearing. Tearing. Now, both say now tearing is a unique malacha. Why? Because in general, malacha is constructive, right? Malacha is constructive, and in fact, you're only chayiv on Shabbos for constructive malacha. So something interesting occurs over here, which is that korea, which is seemingly inherently destructive, is going to be chayiv. Why, says the Gemara? It's only chayiv if you do tearing in a constructive fashion, which is what we call korea amanas litfar. You tear on the conditional with the intention to go ahead and repair. So we'll see where that's done. Says the Gemara, we're going to do this a little bit quicker. Ki asur Rabbi Yitzchak tana shtayim. When Rabbi Yitzchak came along, he said shtayim. right? Ultimately, again, he said that if a person weaves, oreg beis chutin betchila, right? Ultimately, he says for weaving, you're chayiv if you do 2 stitches. I v'hanan tenan gimel. But one second, the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer said in the Mishnah, you have to do 3. To which Gemara says, lo kasha haba alimi habe katini. It depends what kind of thread you're doing. If you're using thicker thread, then halacha l'maisa again, it takes 3 stitches to make something more permanent. If you're using thinner thread, then even 2 stitches will make it permanent. Actually, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. So we'll say, so the Gemara says it's not a contradiction. One is dealing with thicker thread, one is dealing with thinner thread. Says the Gemara, so people explain it different ways. So watch this second wide line, Kuf Hey Amad Aleph, so some explain it this way, Alimi Tlasa, Lo Sasri. So we'll say, so therefore again, thick threads require 3 stitches in order for it not to come apart. Alimi tlasa lo sasri, trey sasri. So by thicker threads, 3 threads ultimately, again, if you weave them together, will remain, but 2 will come undone. Katini, thinner threads, trey nami lo sasri. So also, which makes sense. The thinner the thread, the tighter you could stitch it. So with thicker threads, the Gemara suggests you need 3 stitches in order to create some degree of permanence. 2 will come undone. By thinner thread, halacha l'maisa, even 2 stitches will be enough. V'amrei l'haygi. So others explain a little bit differently. Katini tlasa yedi, trey lo yedi. Others explain about like Rashi di davar hanirahu aval katini b'shtayim pater. So we'll say others explain like this, that ultimately again with thinner thread you need 3 stitches. Why? Because it's only then that it's recognizable that you stitched something. But 2 stitches will not be recognizable. Alimi trey nami yedi. I will say by thicker thread, because it's thicker, therefore more visible, even 2 stitches will be visible. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, ha'oreg gimel chutin betchila ve'achar al ha'oreg chayiv. If a person goes ahead and weaves 2 stitches, or 3 stitches, he's going to be chayiv. Or if you add on 1 stitch to an already stitched garment, or an already woven garment, will be chayiv. The Chum say no, bein betchila bein besof shiuran beis chutin. The Chum say whether you're weaving in the beginning of the garment, or you're just starting the garment, or you're adding on to a garment that already exists, the shear is 2 stitches. Ubesafa, but on the hem, beis chutin berochav gimel batinirin. If you do 2 stitches, literally again in the width of 3 loops, ultimately again you'd be chayiv. Halamazedome, but say to what could this be comparable? La'orei tziltzil katan, to someone who's weaving a small belt. Beis chutin berochav gimel batinirin. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So we just said before that if you go ahead and you weave, but it's by the hem. If you go ahead and you weave two stitches, right, in a width of 3 batinirin, or ha'oreg gimel chutin betchila, or you go ahead and you weave 3 stitches in the beginning, ve'echad al ha'oreg, or add 1 stitch to an already stitched garment, chayiv. Ultimately, again, you'll be chayiv. Now, we'll say, now what does that show? That shows stomach kabbalah. Now, we'll say that reflects the view of Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah. Tanya idach, another brayso, ha'oreg beis chutin al hagas va'al ha'imra. If you go ahead and you weave 2 stitches al hagas. Now, we'll say Rashi points out gas is oreg harbe. That is an already heavily completed part of the garment. Or imra. Imra is the hem. So chayiv. Rabbi Eliezer Omer afilu echad. Rabbi Eliezer says even if you just did 1 stitch, ubesafa shnei chutin berochav shlosha batei nirin chayiv. And on the Rabbi says safa means literally the edge of the garment. Even if you just did these 2 chutin with the width of 3 batei nirin, you'll be chayiv. Halamazed doma. Because what could this be comparable? La'orik tziltzul katan, like one who goes in and stitches a small belt. Shnei chutin al rochav gimel batei nirin. So the Gemara says if a person goes ahead and stitches 2 chutin, right, 2 stitches through the width of the 3 batei nirin, va'oreg beis chutin al hagas va'ala imra chayiv, or one who goes ahead and makes 2 stitches on the gas, which is the heavily woven part of the garment, or again on the imra, on the hem, chayiv. Stama kirabana. We'll say that reflects the view of the Rabbanan. So we'll say, so again, fundamental machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan, ultimately again, how much you have to stitch in order to be significant. Rabbi Eliezer, interestingly enough, making a distinction between where you're even adding on the stitching. Now we know halacha l'maisa, to Rambam Paskins like the Chachamim, that the halachos or the malacha of stitching is very simple. 2 stitches, 2 weavings, right? The malacha of oreg, of weaving, if you make 2 stitches in the woven garment, halacha l'maisa, that's when you're going to be chayiv. The Gemara goes weiter. Ose beis bate nirin. So the Gemara says, "My benirin." Amar Abaye, tarti bebate nira v'chada benira. Ultimately, what this refers to is the heddle rope wrapped around each warp thread 2 times. Good. Bekirus. What's the kirus? My bekirus. Amarav mitzovisa. That refers ultimately again to the heddle thread, or the heddle frame, I should say. It's not only the thread; it's the frame that holds the heddle threads. The heddle threads. Vatover based tfiros. One who goes ahead and sews 2 stitches. I hotanina ba'avos malachos vatover based tfiros. But we already learned this. Remember, in the Mishnah of the Lamates Malachos, we already learned that halacha lamaisa, the shear for tefira, for sewing, is 2 stitches. So why do you have to go ahead and mention it here again? The Gemara says, the mishum de kabayla misna seifa ba'korem naslit for beis tfiros katanen ami hatofer. So the Gemara says, because since the end of the Mishnah wanted to write the halacha about tearing, and the shear for tearing about say how if you tear on Shabbos, how much tearing are you chayiv for? If you tear enough to make 2 stitches. If you tear enough space to make 2 stitches, you're chayiv. So because the Mishnah wanted to teach the halachos of tearing, therefore again the Mishnah restated the halacha of sewing. But 1 second, we learned about Korea, we learned about tearing in the Mishnah of the 39 malachos as well. So why do I need to restate it over here? Because Rabbi say we're going to see the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah speaks about if one goes ahead and tears out of anger or out of mourning, they are not chayiv. So that's the novel case. But because the Mishnah wanted to state that case, it also brought up a general case of tearing. And once we're speaking about tearing, we also brought up the halachos of sewing, because they are all really connected together. You're chayiv for sewing for tefira if you make 2 stitches. Therefore, when tearing, you're chayiv if you tear the space to be able to make 2 stitches. And we'll see how that leads to the next halacha in just a bit. I will say, where do you ever have a case where you tear something in order to repair it, where you tear it in order to stitch it? The Gemara says, It's very simple. Well, let's say you sewed a garment. Bekista literally means it became like pockets. So you say it can happen where you're sewing something, and this item that you sewed is not flat, it's bumpy or it's lumpy. So what would you do in such a case like that? You actually would tear it and re-sew it. So that's the case of Korea Amanas Litvar, something that was sewn together, but was sewn together in a lumpy or bumpy fashion. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, you tear it in order to re-sew it and re-put it back together. Beautiful. Both say, let's begin the Mishnah. Fascinating Mishnah. Let's listen to this. Let's say someone tears out of anger. A person's angry, so he tears his clothing out of anger. Or ameso, a person tears out from mourning for a loved one, for his deceased, for his. Well, we'll see who it is actually. The chalam kulkalin, pturin, both in general, whenever you do something destructive on Shabbos, you are pot. Remember again, malacha by definition is constructive. Therefore, if you do something destructive, you are potter. So the act of tearing your clothing because you're angry, or even an act of tearing your clothing out of mourning, by definition is a destructive act, and therefore you are potter. So what's the interest of, however, if you do something destructive in order to go ahead and pave the way for something constructive, the shear for that malacha is the shear of the constructive activity. So we'll say the easiest example of that is exactly what we just said. The act of tearing ultimately again is destructive. But if you're tearing in order to re-sew, halacha l'maisa, that is a constructive act. So what's the shear for that malacha? The shear for the destructive malacha will be the shear for the constructive malacha. So therefore, again, if I'm tearing with the intention to sew it back, therefore the shear for that malacha is 2 stitches. Shear hamalavein v'amenafetz v'atzoveh v'ataveh. The shear say for literally malavein means whitening or laundering. These are the malachas done to prepare wool. So laundering or menafetz is combing. This is wool. Tzoveh dyeing. Taveh spinning. Kimali rochav hasit kafel. double the size of a sit. So also Rashi points out a sit is the measurement between the index finger and the middle finger. So the amount of double the amount of space in between my middle finger and my middle finger, my index finger and my middle finger. Va'oreg shnei chutin, and a person who goes ahead and weaves 2 threads, shi'ura kumale hasit. For weaving, you will be chayiv ultimately again if you go ahead and you weave the amount of a sit, which, as we just said before, the amount ultimately between your index and middle fingers. So let's begin. So remember, the Mishnah taught me that halacha l'maaseh, if I tear my clothing out of anger or out of mourning, if I do that on Shabbos, I am not chayiv, for that is considered to be a destructive act. Or minu, the Gemara says, 1 second, if one goes ahead and tears his clothing out of anger or out of mourning on Shabbos, he's going to be chayiv. Chayiv for violating Shabbos. Not only that, but also here's what's interesting. Even though again you've been mechal Shabbos, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of kriya, meaning for avelos, for mourning. So the Gemara says, so it's a contradiction. The Mishnah said that halacha l'maaseh, if I tear my clothing out of anger, out of mourning on Shabbos, that's destructive, and therefore I'm pater. The Brisa says that I'm chayiv lo kasha habemeis didei habemeis de'alma. Both say it depends who you're tearing for. If halacha l'maaseh, let's say again, Ruvain tore his clothing. If Ruvain's tearing his clothing because one of the relatives for whom he's obligated to mourn on Shabbos passed away, then that is actually a constructive act, because halacha l'maaseh is a chiyuv of kriya. He should not be doing it on Shabbos, but it's considered to be a constructive act, and therefore again he will be chayiv. On the flip side, meis da'alma, right? Meis da'alma means, let's say Ruvain heard that someone else went ahead and died, and he was very sad or very distressed, so he tore his clothing, but he has no obligation of avelus for that individual. That is considered to be a destructive act, and therefore he will not be chayiv on Shabbos. So we'll say, see here, so all the Gemara is saying is, the act of kriya for the dead could be constructive or destructive. It depends who you're doing it for. If you're doing it for someone whom you are obligated to mourn, that's a constructive act and you'll be chayiv. If you're doing it for someone who you're not obligated to mourn, that is a destructive act and you will be pater. So katani. But 1 second, look at the word of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, hakorea b'chamaso va'ameso. The Mishnah says if you tear for your dead. So it sounds like, again, the Mishnah is also talking about a case where a person is tearing for one of the relatives whom he is obligated to mourn. Yet what? Yet the Mishnah still says that halacha l'maaseh, he's pater, to which the Gemara says, the olam b'meis didei. You're right. Ultimately, again, we're talking about where a person is tearing his clothing. Ultimately, I'm sorry, v'hamei katani, the olam b'meis didei, u'bahanach delav b'nei avelos ninu. So I'll say, to which the Gemara says, you're right. You're tearing, the case over is where Reuven is tearing his clothing for a relative of his, for someone who's close to him, but not for someone whom he is obligated to mourn. So remember again, the Gemara is suggesting over here that the case in the Mishnah is Reuven's tearing kriya because he hears about a loved one who passed away, but l'maaseh, it's not a loved one whom he would be obligated to mourn for. So therefore, again, l'gabe Shabbos, this is still considered to be a destructive act, since again, essentially the Gemara is saying is the only time that avelos, that tearing could be considered to be constructive on your clothing is when it satisfies a halachic obligation. When does it satisfy a halachic obligation? If it's for a relative for whom you are obligated to mourn. But if you're just tearing stam because you're distressed about someone in your family who passed away, but you're not obligated to mourn them, then at least l'gabe Shabbos, that will be considered to be a destructive act. The chachamhu chiyuv mechayiv. I will say, if Reuven heard about the person who passed away was a Talmud Chacham, you are obligated ultimately again to mourn and ultimately to tear your clothing for the passing of a Talmud Chacham. Desanya, Chacham shemeis hakol krovav. If a Chacham dies, Talmud Chacham dies, everyone is his relative. Hakol krov, everyone is his relative. Elaima hakol kikrovav. Rather, Rabbi say what it means is everyone is like his relative. Hakol korin alav, hakol chotzun alav, hakol mevarin alav birachava. So we'll say apparently when a great Talmud Chacham dies, the halacha is everyone observes mourning for the great Talmud Chacham. Right? When the Talmud Chacham dies, it is considered to be like a personal loss for everyone. So therefore, again, everyone does kriya. Chotzun means they used to bear their shoulder. That was part of the mourning practice. Mevarin means the sudas havra. That was the meal that they would eat in the street after the levaya. So interestingly enough, so therefore again, you could have, the Gemara is just pointing out that halacha l'maisa, if the case in the Mishnah is where, let's say, Ruvain heard that a great Talmud Chacham died, so now obviously you can't tear Kriya on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. But if Ruvain did so out of mourning for the Talmud Chacham, then Einachinami, he would be chayiv in that case as well. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, everyone is obligated to mourn for the passing of a Talmud Chacham. Therefore, the tearing of his clothing on Shabbos for a Talmud Chacham would be deemed a constructive act, and therefore he would be chayiv. To which the Gemara says, Lo tzricha delav chachamhu. It must be that in the Mishnah's case, the guy who died was not a Talmud Chacham. Right? They even said it in the Hesped. Right? He was a good guy, but he was not a Talmud Chacham. So now that we know that he wasn't a Talmud Chacham, then ultimately, again, therefore, that's why in the case in the Mishnah, halacha l'maisa, when Ruvain tore his clothing, he's going to be pater, because it is considered to be a destructive act. V'i adam kasherhu chiyuv v'mechayev. That is incredible. Not only that, if a person, even a person wasn't a Talmud Chacham, but he was an adam kasher, he was a good person. And I will say, there's an incredible amount of literature about this, about what is the definition of an Adam Kasher. So I will say, here's what you see. You see from the fact that it has a title and it has a designation, that it's not easy to be an Adam Kasher. So apparently, again, there's like great Talmud Chacham, and then there's Adam Kasher. So if you hear about the passing of an Adam Kasher, chiyuv v'mechayev, you're also chayiv to go ahead and tear your clothing. The Sanya. We'll say this is incredible. The Sanya. So we'll say, I just want to point out what the Gemara is doing. All the Gemara is just pointing out is, we were assuming, before we got into this conversation, we were assuming that the only time you would ever have an obligation to tear your clothing is when it's one of the relatives whom you're obligated to sit Shiva for. What the Gemara is just pointing out is there are other cases as well that would, of loss, that would generate an obligation of Kriya, even though the people aren't related to you. It's an incredible Gemara, the Sanya. Why, chas v'shalom, do a person's children die when they're young? In order that he should come to mourn for an Adam Kasher. The Gemara says, what? What does that mean? It almost sounds like, why does a person lose his children chas when they're young? So the person should know how to cry for an Adam Kasher when the Adam Kasher davens. So you're going to take the person as collateral, so that this way, again, when the Adam Kasher dies, people will know how to mourn. It doesn't make sense. Ella mipnei shelo bacha ve'es ala Adam Kasher. Rather, I'll say what it means is that ultimately, again, because a person did not mourn when an Adam Kasher passed away, therefore, halacha l'maisa, again, he's punished ultimately, again, with his children being taken. Now, I'll say, what does that mean? So Rashi points out over here that what it means is, as far as the Maharsha points out the same idea, what it means is like this. Halacha l'maisa, when a person has to understand that when great people are taken from this world, there is a certain level of kapara that is achieved. A person has to appreciate the kapara, ultimately, that the death of an Adam Kasher, for that matter, the death of a tzaddik, the death of a Talmud Chacham, is able to achieve on our behalf. And that so much, the ability to spare us from so much punishment comes ultimately, again, from the death of great people. So that's really what the Gemara is driving at over here. That a person should realize that halacha l'maisa, when they hear about the death of an Adam Kasher, have hakaras hatov towards that individual, because it's quite possible that individual has absorbed some level of liability that would otherwise be conferred upon me. Because here it is, whoever cries, whoever mourns for the loss of an Adam Kasher, he is forgiven for all of his sins. Bishvil kavod sha'asa. So we'll say, if you give kavod, if you mourn the loss of an Adam Kasher, you recognize ultimately, again, what that person meant to the world and his great accomplishments, and you recognize that he probably bore some level of suffering for the rest of us, then halacha l'maisa, your sins are forgiven. So what it really means is that if a person doesn't go ahead and appreciate what the Adam Kasher does for the collective, what the tzaddik does for the collective, what the Talmud Chacham does for the collective, then he's forced to bear the brunt of his own iniquities, which could chas v'shalom result in a variety of different things. To which the Gemara says, you're right, therefore, lo tzricha delav Adam Kasher. It must be, I will say that in the case of the Mishnah, where Ruvain in the Mishnah tore his clothing, it wasn't for an Adam Kasher either. Because if it was for an Adam Kasher, then einachinami, that would be a constructive act and it would be chayiv. V'i dekai b'shas yitzias neshama chiyuv mechayiv. Further, I'm going to say, if you are present with a person at the time that they die, there's also an obligation to tear your clothing. Desan Reb Shimon Elazar Omer, ha'omid al ameis b'shas yitzias neshama, chayav likroa. We'll say if a person is with a person, if Ruvain was with someone when they died, even if the person is not related to you, halacha l'maaseh, you're obligated to go out and tear your clothing if you are there at the moment that a person passes away. Halam mazedoma, what is this comparable to? Let's say for Torah shenisrafa, because also when a person passes away, it's the equivalent of a Sefer Torah that has been burned. Sefer Torah has been lost. So both say, so what's the case? Right? So ultimately, both say, so therefore it must be the case in the Mishnahs where a person was not present at the time that the person passed away. Both say, I just point out about that. That halacha, the Gesher Chaim brings down that today, we're very often not knowing this. We don't conduct ourselves like this. That even if a person is present, this happens all the time. A person is with a loved one at the time they pass away. Generally, the minhag today is we don't do kriya at the time the person passes away. The Gesher Chaim writes that's because many people are not proficient in the halachos of kriya. They're not sure which side, they're not sure how much, they're not sure about. So therefore, generally, we go ahead, the Gesher Chaim writes, is we do kriya at the levaya, at the funeral, when there's a chevra kadisha, or there's a rav, or there's someone else who is present to instruct about how to do kriya. So Teinach Meso. So we'll say is incredible. So now fine. So now I understand the first statement of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah therefore says both say that halacha l'maisa, if you tear your clothing out of frustration for the dead, but halacha l'maisa again, it's a non-halachically mandated tearing, so you will not be chayiv. You will not be chayiv. If you were to tear out of halachic obligation, let's say for one of the relatives that you would be chayiv to mourn for, then you would be chayiv. So we'll say, because again, if you tear in a non-halachically mandated way, right, for someone you're not obligated to mourn for, then einachinami, that's destructive and therefore you're pater. If you tear for someone whom you are obligated to mourn for, that is constructive and you will be chayiv. What about, the Gemara says, ela chamaso achamaso kasha. We will say, what about tearing out of anger? Right, the Brises seem to indicate that Allah Chalamaysa again, I am chayiv for that. Yet the Mishnah said I'm pater because that's destructive. The both say is incredible. Chamasa chamasa nam lo kasha har Yehuda Rabbi Shimon. Har Rabbi Yehuda da Amar melacha shein tzricha legufa chayiv Allah. Both say remember it's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that Allah Chalamaysa. So you're chayiv even a melacha shein tzricha legufa. You're chayiv even a melacha that doesn't have a constructive purpose. Rabbi Shimon Amar the melacha shein tzricha legufa pater Allah. Rabbi Shimon says that you're pater. That's the machlokas. Eimar d'sham say Rabbi Yehuda b'metakin b'mekalkel mishamas. They both say even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that halacha l'maisa you're chayiv. That's only when you've done something constructive. But the act of tearing out of anger, Rabbi say, is a destructive malacha. Why would you be chayiv at all? Both say this is incredible. Rabbi Avin hainami metakinu. Both say get ready for this. Tearing your clothing out of anger is also constructive. Why is it constructive? Deka'avid nachas ruach liotzro, because it gives you an outlet for your anger. I will say, listen to how incredible this is. So I want to be clear. The Gemara is not condoning the process, right? The Gemara is not condoning, I should say, the practice, right? Because you're doing something destructive. I will say, what the Gemara is saying is to say that it's without purpose is not true. Right? It's not true that when a person out of anger tears something, or for that matter breaks something, although this is a destructive act, and certainly not good, Chazal not encouraging this, lemaisa, it allows for an expression of frustration, and hopefully what that does is, it allows me to vent a little bit. So because it allows me to vent, it allows me to express some of the anger. Hopefully, again, what it does is it relieves some of the internal pressure. I will say it's incredible. So therefore, halacha lemaisa, it's considered to be constructive. So as I said, I just want to point out something amazing you see from Chazal. You see from Chazal that, we all walk around with stuff that builds up inside in life. Inevitably, we all do. Just some of us walk around with a lot of stuff, a little bit of stuff, but in life it is important to have that release valve. Now, the goal is not to have a release valve that's destructive, right? That's the goal. So not to go around breaking stuff or ripping stuff, but to recognize that at every stage in life, everybody needs a release valve in some way, to make sure that you find that release valve in a way that's healthy, that's constructive, and that doesn't ultimately, again, result in destructive activity. Ukahai gavna mishai. So I'll say, I don't understand. So is that true? That releasing your anger in a destructive way in which you're tearing something, is that permitted? So Gemara says, "V'hatanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Mishum Chilfa bar Igra Shenemar Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Nuri Hamikaria begada bechamaso." If one goes in and tears his clothing in anger, we'll say first wide line, "V'hamishaber kelev bechamaso," or breaks utensils out of anger. V'amefazer ma'osa b'chamosa, or throws away his money in anger. Rabbi say this is wild. Yehei be'einecha ka'oved avodah zara. In your eyes, you should look at such a person like this as if he's an idolater. Someone who tears his clothing out of anger, someone who goes in and breaks stuff out of anger, throws away his money out of anger, should be like an idolater in your eyes. What does that mean? Shekach umnaso shel Yetzer Hara. Because Rabbi say this is the way the Yetzer Hara works. Hayom omer lo asei kach, ulamachar omer lo asei kach. Ad she'omer lo avodah zara v'holech v'ovid. Rabbi say this is a wild Gemara. Because how does the Yetzer Hara, what does the Yetzer Hara tell you to do? Today the Yetzer Hara tells you to do this. Tomorrow it tells you to do this. And the next day it tells you to worship idolatry, and you'll do that. Rabbi say, what does that mean? The moment in life that I begin to engage in irrational, inappropriate behavior, I set the tone and I set the stage for idolatry. Right? I will say there's nothing more irrational or ununderstandable than idolatry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives me anything and everything, and yet I forsake God for an idol. So how do you end up there? To which the Gemara says it's a progression. When you begin engaging in irrational, inappropriate, and destructive behavior, that sets the stage for the ultimate irrational, inappropriate, and destructive behavior, which is avodah zara. So if today I'm acting out of anger, without seichel, without intellect, without a mindfulness, and I'm tearing stuff, I'm breaking stuff, I'm throwing stuff away, you're only a few steps away from oved avodah zara. I will say what the Gemara is saying over here is something really incredible, which is that halacha l'maisa, a person has to be in control of themselves. Person has to be in control of themselves. And the moment I lose control of myself and begin engaging in destructive behaviors is the moment literally I'm setting myself up for idolatry. It sounds crazy, right? It sounds crazy that Lamaisa, from tearing my clothing or from breaking, I'm going to be Oved Avodah Zara, but it's not. The psychology of it is very clear. When I start tearing my clothing out of anger and I start going ahead and breaking stuff and throwing away my money, we'll say there's two things. Number one, I'm lacking control. Number two, I'm engaging in objectively destructive behavior, which means I'm no longer living my life with my mind, I'm living my life with impulse. The moment you begin to live that way is the moment, says the Gemara, you're going down a very bad road. Let's just finish this up. The Gemara says, Rabbi Avin Mikra, what's the pasuk that supports this? Lo yebecha el zar, v'lo tishtacha ve'ela el nechar. Don't, I'm saying, now listen to how the pasuk literally translates. Literally translates, don't allow a foreign god to be in you. Don't allow an alien god to be in you. Ezehu el zar sheyesh begufo shel adam. Ultimately, I will say, who is the alien god that is inside the body of a person? Have omer ze Yetzer Hara. Ultimately, again, I will say that's the Yetzer Hara. So I'll say, who's the alien god who lives inside of you? That's the Yetzer Hara. And if you begin to act in a destructive, nonsensical way, you're giving the Yetzer Hara ultimately a greater hold inside of you. The El Zar, the alien God, is taking hold inside of you, and once the alien God takes hold inside of you, unfortunately, Chasron, there's no telling what you may do afterwards. To which the Gemara says, Lo tzvicha dika avid lemirma imsa in shebese. We'll say, what's the case over here? This is actually incredible. What's the case? The case is, no. The reason why you're breaking stuff over here and tearing stuff is in order to put a little bit of fear into the hearts of the members of your household. Then I will say, I'll do this just for one moment. This is actually quite amazing. The Gemara talks about this idea that sometimes there's an inyan of going ahead and the balabas should put fear into the members, into the hearts of the members of his household. And I will say, before you begin to sign off, I see people are beginning to sign off. I know it's late. Let me be clear. This reflects certain societal realities. Do not try this at home. Do not put fear into the heart of anyone. Right? Don't try to engender fear in the heart of anyone. Don't try to rule your family or your household or anyone else with an iron hand or any. Doesn't work. Again, there are profound societal differences between the times of the Gemara and now. This was a concept. Now I will say, is there a need ultimately to engender a sense of reverence and respect? Yes, and that's a challenge because reverence and respect for authority in general today is something that is highly unpopular and constantly pushed back against. Does a balabas, does a head of household have to have the respect and reverence of the members of his family? 100%. But I was saying, instead of going ahead and engendering fear, earn it by setting the right kind of example for your mishpacha. Right? Be the right kind of person, and the respect and the reverence is sure to follow. But nevertheless, we'll say, right, we'll have to stop over here. We'll have to stop over here with the Gemara suggesting over here that perhaps the breaking of stuff was perhaps something that was done in order to engender the respect of the members of the house. So we'll say, so bottom line, what the Gemara ends up saying, again, we'll have to continue with this. Rabbi Yehuda Neuberger is going to give shir tomorrow night on Motzei Shabbos. But what the bottom line the Gemara ends off with ultimately is that halacha l'maisa, tearing and breaking, although objectively destructive malachas for which you would be pater for on Shabbos, if done for some constructive purpose, tearing, I will say, would be, the constructive purpose would be avelos. Avelos. When you're obligated to tear, that is considered to be constructive. Breaking, apparently, again, if you broke something, either according to one opinion to relieve stress, or the second opinion in order to engender a sense of fear in the members of your household, if that's a good thing for those circumstances, could be acts, could be examples of constructive malachas, where even though you're doing something destructive, because the purpose is constructive, you would be chayav. Right? I'm sorry they went a little bit later. Yashakach to everyone. Those of you who are joining us on the Zoom minion, we'll end this in this class now. We started in the shul parking lot in just a few moments. Yashakach to everyone. A good Erev Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh.